Hello everyone, my name is Ken Dole. Welcome to this edition of OptionVue Essentials. Today we're going to get back to basics with OptionVue. I've been doing backtrader pretty intensively the last few months during my Essentials broadcast. This time due to popular demand, because we got a lot of new trial users on these webcasts. So I'm going to try and focus on getting OptionVue going from square one, how you would normally see it when you first start using the program. So any experienced users will probably still get something out of it because there's some new features I'm going to demonstrate. So don't immediately click off if you experienced with OptionVue. Will probably still cover things that you want to know. But let's just start out with the basic screen here. So this is the quotes display. This is called the quotes display. And if you want to navigate around in OptionVue, let me just start out that way. Very basic tool is this window button right here. And anything you have open will be displayed underneath this box here, quotes display. That's all we have open right now. So if I open up something else, it'll display down here, and then you can navigate back and forth without closing things out. So, and that's also how you can find out what these different pages are named that you're in. So that's step one. So right now we're just seeing the symbols that come with the program when you first open it up. And this is the time of the data. So we're getting live quotes here. And on this page, the first thing you want to do whenever you open up OptionVue, just make sure you're connected to a server. So that's real important. There'll be a notation up here in the upper right. It's called NV10, and that is short for NetView Server 10. And it also tells you the number of symbols you're using. And the way it works in OptionVue is every single symbol you have, both on this page on the quotes display and any open option matrices. If I open up a price line matrix, we get a bunch of options coming in. So every one of these option prices is a different option symbol, and that is counting as one symbol on your program. So if you have 1,000 symbols, typically, you can see we just used up 399 just with opening this matrix and what's in the quotes display. Now, if I want to get back to my point earlier, without closing out this matrix and get back to the quotes display, this is the way to do it. Click the window tab, then go back to the quotes display. Now I could open up another matrix from here, and I could have more than one matrix open at once. You can either you can open a matrix from the quotes display in two ways. You can either double click the symbol, or you can highlight the symbol and then click matrix. Either way works. No preference personally. It just depends on my mood, I guess. Either way is fine. So now, these are the basic symbols, and you can put as many symbols as you want in here. And with the latest versions, there's a new feature which allows you to control this page with tabs. So you can easily navigate around your various screens. You don't have to use the page down. It used to be how it was. You'd have to page down to get to your different symbols. So what I'm going to show you now is, first of all, how you'd create another grouping here in the quotes display. So if I wanted just one for financial stocks, for example, I could just create a few lines. To create a line on the list here, just click Insert on your keyboard, and it'll add a line above wherever you're highlighted. So I'm just clicking Insert, so I just added a few lines. So say I want to leave a few lines for futures, and I want to insert a new one. I just hold the Shift key down and type the pound key, and then type in financial stocks. And then I could type in B of A or whatever. BAC is Bank of America, sorry. MasterCard, etc. So that's how you add symbols Next, if you had a prepared list, if you have an Excel program with a bunch of symbols that you want to bring into OptionVue, we can do that pretty easily. So what I'm going to do next is go to an Excel spreadsheet here. And I can highlight symbols from here. Say I wanted to put something into my futures symbols. And scroll down to the list where I get to the futures. I actually did this in reverse. I took the quotes display that I had and made an Excel spreadsheet, and it comes out with this list. So I'm just reversing the process now in a manner of speaking here. I'm just looking for the futures. There's my financial stocks. I'll just use that since that's handy. What I could do is just highlight those symbols, hold down the Shift key, and let's get back to the top here. Got a lot of symbols in here you can see. It doesn't really matter. I'm just going to highlight a few here. So if I just use the Shift key and then right-click on it, click Copy. So now they're on the clipboard. Go back to the program and click Edit, Edit, Paste Symbols. It's going to put it wherever you're highlighted in the program on the quotes display there. So just added them all in. So that's the first step. So you can do that a number of times if I wanted to, if I had saved my quotes display in that fashion that I did, or if you just have another list that got generated from another program, that's an easy way to get symbols in. The next thing I'm going to do is fill in the futures a different way. There's a different way to get symbols in here. I can input them from either Survey or OpScan, the search features of OptionVue. So I'm going to start out by creating a list of futures symbols, and I'm just going to say I'm going to pick 50 different futures symbols. I want to pick them based on greatest dollar volume of options. So it's going to pull everything, basically, but and sort them by the greatest dollar volume of options. And switch my list of assets of type to futures. So what this is going to do is just generate a list of all the, just put one in there. It's asking for a minimum DVO, which is dollar volume of options. And now it should give me a list. And if I just click one symbol, it would insert just that one. But again, if I use the Shift key and click a bottom one, it'll insert them all now. But I just want to make sure that I'm highlighted in the right spot here on my quotes display, so it doesn't just put them on the previous list on the financial stocks. So I'm highlighted there now. Back to Survey. There's my list. Click Insert. It doesn't look like it did anything, but if we go back to our quotes display now, there they all are. Now there is a third way you can get symbols in, and that's under the Edit Lookup tab. So if you had a future symbol, for example, that just wasn't filling in data, perhaps you have the wrong symbol, you could just look it up. So you wanted, if you knew the symbol, you could type it in, or you could just say, I had somebody call for this one recently. So NZD was a symbol. I could just put that one in since it didn't come in the list already. Just click there. It's going to put it now in that spot, Insert. So there it is. NZD, New Zealand dollar. Not very commonly known, but it's on the list. So there you go. So that's the three main ways you can get data symbols in without having to type them in. Well, you can always just type them in. But besides that, so 4 ways really. Now I'm going to show you the tab feature. If I want to, instead of now having to, because I got a lot of symbols in here now, I would have to use the page down, and I could do that, this page down or page up, in order to view the different symbols. Better way to go is to manage by tabs and have different pages, different tabs. So we can right-click on the bottom bar of this page and click Add a Tab. So we'll just call one Futures. And now what I can do is go back to the previous tab, highlight the first left-click the header bar for Futures to highlight it, and then right-click it. So it's two steps. First left-click to highlight, and then right-click brings up this box, move this group over into Futures, and now it's gone. Where is it? Well, it's over here now. So I've got everything from that grouping that moved over. So you want to manage your quotes display by groupings. So remember, we're going to use the pound key, shift pound, to create a new grouping, and then you can shift your groupings over to a new tab. If you get too many symbols and you have to start paging, we could even break this list up and call it, Futures 1, Futures 2, if you wanted to do it that way. You would just have to add another symbol header in there. And then I could create a new tab down here. And back to the Futures 1, left click, right click, move this group over to Futures 2. So now we have Futures separate so that it wouldn't be exceeding one page. So we can get the financial stocks in the same fashion. I'll create another grouping for that. Back to the main, left click, right click, boom. So there we go. So you can create as many of these tabs as you want. Of course, you could create smaller names and fit more on the line without having to use the scroll bar. Eventually, you'll have to use the scroll bar if you get too many. Now, the next thing is if you wanted to change the order of these down here, we can just right-click and manage tabs and highlight one and say I wanted to move the financials into the first slot. Just highlight it and move the order up. There we go. So I wanted the main back. Just right-click, manage tabs, highlight it, move it up. So there we go. So that's how you can manage tabs and keep everything organized. Now the next thing about the quotes display is you can turn the data off. Say you're not using, you're using too many symbols, and you're not able to open another matrix because you've run out of symbols in the upper right. See right now most people would be out. I put my symbol limit higher, so I'm able to use more than 1,000 symbols. But normally right now you would be out of symbols, and this would just be a flashing 1,000, which would mean you couldn't pull any more data. So if you open another matrix, you would just get a blank matrix. So that's another common problem, which you can diagnose yourself. If you just see that flashing 1,000, you know you've got too many symbols up there. So one way to address that would just be to turn the data feed off for a grouping that you're not using right now, and then it wouldn't pull real-time data, and that would lower your symbol count. So you can see if I click that green box and it changes to yellow, it did change my symbol count. It dropped it by that number of symbols in that grouping. If I put it back on, back up. So the other way, if I go back to the matrices that I had open here, of course Google is a huge matrix. It's got a lot of symbols in it. I can limit the number of symbols in a matrix, and we're going to get into that in a minute. But let me just start out by saying this is a list of all the option prices for not everything that's available on Google now. Just it's going to open according to default settings. It's not showing every single strike available here. That's the first point you need to know when you open a matrix. It doesn't necessarily show every single strike available for that asset. We could have to add new strikes or change the settings. So where we would do that is in the Define tab. So we wanted, we were doing out of the money credit spreads. And you needed more call strikes up here, or put spreads, needed more put strikes at the bottom. So we can go to Define and change. These are the default settings, the extent ranges for in the monies and out of the monies. This is under the Define window. First button on the left, second row here. You got two rows of main program buttons here. This one is always visible on the top row. This one is only visible, the second row is only visible when you open a matrix. So you'll only see this define box when you have a matrix there. So if we go in now and change this to large, and say I wanted to include weeklies here, I could also do that from this box. I could include weeklies and leaps, which is my preference. And I could include the out-of-the-money extent for the calls to large as well. So now I'm going to click Apply, click OK. And now, of course, that's going to pull in even more symbols, so I'm burning up, you know, a very much larger number here. I moved it up about 500 symbols. So what I could do if I wasn't using all these months, I could change the number of months of listed options down to 2 or 3, for example. So that would help eliminate some of those symbols if I wasn't using those further out months. And click Apply, and that would reduce some of the symbol counts. You'd brought it down to about a couple hundred. So those are a couple tricks. You can also, of course, just change it to small if you didn't need all those out-of-the-money strikes for both the puts and the calls. And I could drop this down to 2. And see if you're just using the front weekly, for example, and you're just using at the money, so you could have used this setting. And there you go. So now you're using only a few symbols comparatively. I was up to about 1,500 symbols. Now I'm sitting at about 1,000.
There's also a lot of weeklies if you don't look at weeklies.
Right. So if you don't need the weeklies, then of course you could check them off for a certain matrix that was pulling a lot of symbols. The next thing up here is the global settings. This is your main program default settings, so I want to get into that a little bit next. That would pertain to the matrix. I could click on View, Default Auto Strike, which is that window we were just looking at in the Define window. So that would be the preference that would apply to any matrix that you open. It's not going to change one that you've already had settings made for by opening it and changing your preferences. So it won't delete any settings that you already have, but it will open this way for a new one that you open, a new matrix. So if I made weeklies and leaps my default and leave it at, this would be what a new matrix would open as. So that gets us going now. I always like to turn the standard deviation shading on. So that's going to be basically allow us to see the at-the-money strike, a new feature in 7.3.5 where it shows the at-the-money strike with a slightly different shading. And the first standard deviation is the mauve color or purple color. And then the second standard deviation is the light blue color. And if I wanted to if I wanted to see the second standard deviation down here, I would have to actually go in and add strikes, and that's another thing we can do. We can say if you had already had it on maximum extent, we could go into Define, that same Define window, click Options, and start adding in strikes. So you just wanted to see a 750 and a 700, which I'm sure are there for Google. We could just add those two strikes in, and they now will appear. So they're not going to have options for the weeklies way down there, but for the monthlies, looks like there is information that fills in here. Let me just close and reopen on that one. There we go. So the monthlies have those 750 and 700 strikes. Now you see an S here. That just means that we haven't defined that strike for the weeklies. I would have to go into the weekly and actually add it, or it doesn't exist. In this case, it probably just isn't defined in weeklies. So we could go in and the same thing there. It's just a separate window for adding in those weekly strikes. So we click the Define Weekly box, and for that second weekly, put in the 750 and 700 strike. Click OK. And there it is. That second weekly now has one of those. The 700 doesn't exist because we just defined it and it's still not pulling any data, but the 750 does exist for that second weekly. So that's how we can adjust the strikes. Now if you did change all your strike settings or strike preferences, what will happen is this auto strike enabled box, if that's checked, it's going to potentially overwrite whatever settings you put in here as far as your different strike changes that you made. So one trick to hold your settings, once you get the matrix looking like you want, is just to uncheck this box. The downside to that is if there's a new series added, you won't see it. So you would have to recheck it if you wanted to add a new weekly series in, for example. But just from one day to the next, and you already got everything midweek that you want to see, you could just uncheck that box to make sure all your strikes that you added in will remain there. So that's how we can get all the strikes that we want to see in, and only the strikes we can customize however you want. The next important thing is these columns contain a lot of data, and there's a lot of parameters available here. We can actually see all of them if we right-click, and these are all the available parameters that we could add in potentially in view in our matrix. We can't view them all at once, of course, in the main format here. We could actually, by double-clicking one of the prices, see all that information in this kind of a format, but not on the main grid here. So what we can do, though, is see up to 9 of those column parameters in the main format, and that would be by changing it to a 3x3. I don't prefer that format, but this is what it would look like. I like to see it lining up with all the columns in the same. So this is the legend for that particular format. So this is my particular preference, and the way we set a new matrix format preference is going to the Format button here. And I'm just going to use a 1x6. That's my favorite. We're going to change this to Delta, and then original price. Because if you're tracking a condor credit spread, or say you sold an option and you want to be able to track whether it's profitable or not, this is a great way to do it. That original price will tell you the price that you purchased or sold the option at. So now if I'm going to save this setting, I have 3 default settings I can save here. Set default 1 or 2 or 3. If I just clicked out of this, I would see that now in my matrix, but it wouldn't necessarily be saved. It's not going to be saved unless you go back in and click set default 1, 2, or 3. I'm going to set it as 1. Now, if I happen to close this out and I want to come back and it opens some other way, this is what's in set the second default setting. I can just click the little 1 here next to Format. That'll bring back my default setting number 1. That's what we just created there. So you can either set these from the Format tab, or you can go to View Default Matrix Format. Either one basically opens the same window. So you really get 3 settings. You don't get 3 settings for each matrix. If you change it here for one matrix, you change it for all of them, basically. So I like to see this kind of a setup where I can enter a trade, and I'm going to show you why here in a minute. So we're going to get started with entering a trade, which is how we use the matrix. We want to propose a trade and then analyze it. So let me start up with a basic method that you would normally use. Say I wanted to use that second weekly. I'm going to buy one option there. So now I can analyze that either with the T or the B button. Analyze will open that graph. It'll show me a projected profit or loss at various timelines. So that's one way of entering a trade in the matrix. And there's a new way, a new feature that we just came out with in the latest version. And it creates a temporary or proposed trade that isn't actually entered in. And we do that by, let me get rid of this. If I highlight it and delete it, it'll be gone. We do that by holding the Shift key down and either right or left clicking. A right click will sell one, and a left click will buy one. So I have to hold the Shift key down. Now that trade isn't actually entered. If I try to analyze this, it won't. There's no actual trade there. It's just telling you this is what I want to start with. And the advantage to this is I can open up the spread window and then change the quantity. So I'm going to show you that right now. So say I wanted to put a debit spread on, hold the Shift key down, and right-click this. I'm going to sell that one. So now I would click on the Shift key again to keep these highlighted and click the spread window. If you don't hold the Shift key down when you click spread, these boxes will disappear, but your trade will still be there. And now I can enter the quantity in the trade field here at the top of the second column. So if I typed in a 5, enter, now my trade is actually a 5 lot. And if I click OK, click anywhere else in the matrix, there it is. So it's a 5 lot. And if I wanted to go back in, that spread is still there, and I can change the quantity again. Say I wanted a 6 lot now. Rather than typing in each individual leg and typing in you can always do that, but this is a quick way to get a condor in to your matrix. And again, you would just hold the Shift key down. I'll add the put spread now. So I'll make this a credit spread on the put side. Say I'm bullish. So I'm going to hold the Shift key down and left click to sell, right click to buy. Click the spread. Now if I didn't hold the Shift key down that time, it disappeared there, so I don't see which options I'm in. But if I type a 5 here, there it is. There's my trade. And now I can see the theoretical price of that spread here. And now I can click Analyze. Once it shows up in the matrix with the blue type, I'm able to click Analyze and see this trade. So that's how it would look. So that's a new feature which speeds up the process of entering a trade, because previously we had to type each one in, type the number in. So now the next phase is if I want to record this transaction, if this is a trade that I actually made in a brokerage account, I can track the performance of it by putting it into a transaction log. And the first step there is you get an account. It's called Account 1 when you open the program at first. But you could also create as many different accounts as you want using the Info tab. So if I just call this account, new account, TOS, for example, Thinkorswim. So you got a brokerage account with Thinkorswim, which is what I have. We'll put in doesn't matter what you start it with, whatever amount is appropriate. And you can keep these earnings rates at 0 here, because they're pretty much 0 anyway. And I always like to uncheck the slippage box if it's checked. Check the commissions. You do want to include those. And also check this box, GL to include previously realized GLs. Check that box. That's useful. That's gain-loss that are going to be recorded historically. And now I could set the commissions here. Say I'm paying $1, no minimum. You would enter it that way. If you were paying a minimum, just put it in here. So you had a $9.95 minimum and 75 cents per option, which is typical. That's how you'd enter that. I was going to put it back to $1 per option, no minimum. And you can also put in your stock flat fee there of $5 or whatever is appropriate for you. Once you're done with that, click OK, and now you've got a new account. And if you wanted to delete that account, say you were doing some testing or just didn't like the way that account was created, just go ahead and click this account is closed, delete account, gone, just that easy. So don't worry about creating a lot of these. The only drawback to creating a ton of accounts is that eventually you get a long list that will exceed the view of the page, and you'll have to scroll down, and so you can delete them very easily in that fashion. So now say I wanted to record this was a real trade that I had going. I can analyze the proposed trade first. Click the T button there. That T is for trade. So there it was. And now I want to get it into the transaction log. I click Convert Trade. Convert Trade. So the reason I have it set up like this is now I'm going to see the trade. Everything I have in the trade column slide over into the existing position column. And it's also going to show me the original price of that spread of each option. So all that happened now when I click Convert Trade. See, I've got the existing position now, and there was the price that I executed at. Now, if that didn't match the price that you actually filled at, what you'd want to do is go into your T-log, your transaction log, and highlight the price and change it. Say you actually filled at $7.20. Just type that in. You can also change the commission if that didn't match what you actually paid. Put any number in there. All of these fields are interactive. You can change any of them. Although don't advise trying to change the symbol column at first. You can do it, but if you get the wrong symbol in there, it'll erase your position from the matrix. So that's how we can start out. And now as I go forward, I'm going to generate a profit and loss here for that position down below in the summary section. Each day that goes by, it's going to create a profit and loss. So that's a great way to get started with OptionVue. Just get your quotes display going with the tabs and your symbols in there, and then get familiar with the matrix and get familiar with navigating around using the window tab rather than using the close button all the time. With a little practice and practice with entering the spread trades, it's a very efficient program if you want to quickly analyze a trade. And now if I had this position on and I wanted to adjust it, what you would do is propose a trade, and we could analyze both of them together before you actually made it a real trade by hitting the Convert button. So again, I'll use that new feature. Put the spread window, hold the Shift key down, and I'll right-click, sell one, and buy one up here. And then click the spread window and make it a 3-lot. So there's my proposed trade. I haven't actually put it into the transaction log yet, but I could analyze it as though it were by clicking this B button, which is for both existing and trade. Click Analyze. It now includes that 3-lot credit spread I just added there. So if I like that adjustment, I could just click Convert, and now it's part of the transaction log. Just added that in there. So now here's another thing you can do. Say I wanted to analyze that second spread or all three of these spreads differently. The transaction log will allow you to group them according to the type of strategy or dates you entered the trade, any way you want to, basically by using a letter. So you have 26 groupings for each symbol, for each stock symbol or index symbol. And so if you use the letter A for Google, for example, and then you switch to the Russell, you can use the letter A on the same matrix, no problem. Just you can't use it again for Google in that same transaction log, or it'll group it together with any trades you'd put in as A. So let's make this first spread A, make the second one B. An upper or lowercase really doesn't matter. And this one will be C. Now if I do that, so I've got 3 spreads going now. And what I'll see now is a new box opened up, existing position included. And this will allow me to see everything together in the summary section down below, and also the Analyze screen will show everything together. But what if I wanted to see just the initial spread, the call debit spread that I had? I could click on the all, and then it opens up this drop-down, click A, switch it to A. Now I just see the first spread I put on, and I can analyze separately, either with the E or the B, existing or both. Will get you to the Analyze screen and just seeing that initial debit spread that you had on there. So that's pretty nifty. Now if I wanted to see the third one, the adjustment, the call credit spread, there it is. Click Analyze. And that brings up another interesting feature, which I'm going to get into in just a moment here. If I clicked on all of these at one time or another and analyzed them, They are stored up here in this yellow arrow in the upper right corner here will store each of the graphs. You can't view them all simultaneously, but you can view them one after another in sequential order, according to however you opened them up. The only stipulation here is you don't close out the matrix. Once you close the matrix, all those saved graphs from the Analyze window are erased. It's just a temporary cache. So let's go back in and just scroll through those quickly. You can see the various spreads that you have on, one at a time. And then, of course, all of them together. Now, if you wanted to, you could superimpose one over the other. So it's going to superimpose the previous. What was the previous one? This one right here. So if I'm on this screen, if I click the superimpose, it's going to superimpose the previous. Actually, this was the previous. So there we go. So now you've got the overall and the last spread that we did. And then you can see the difference between the two pretty easily all on one screen. Or you can just view them separately by using those arrows. And you can do as many. If I wanted to analyze a completely different trade on a different weekly, you can do that. So I want to do a credit spread over here to balance my debit spread on the front weekly or the second weekly. I could open the spread window a different way. This is how it normally works. If I just highlight, this is the original way it used to work for creating a spread window, which is just to highlight whichever one you want to add here. So first of all, I would just clear the spread window, highlight that one, and click the plus box, highlight the short, click the minus box, show the spread window, and then I change the number here. And it does the same thing, basically. So now I've got a 3-lot there. Just a little easier using the new feature with hold the Shift key down and right-click. That is just a phantom proposed trade, by the way, so anytime I click anywhere else on the program, it just disappears. It's not actually in there until you get it showing up as the blue type here using the spread window. So there we go. Now if I click Analyze on this one, now I've got that one, and all the previous graphs are still stored there. And there you go. Everything that we've previously looked at here is all available just by using these arrows in the upper right. So that's how I mainly like to use OptionVue. If I've got a bunch of trades on, I can isolate them in this fashion, analyze an adjustment, and use the different timelines on the graph. So now we're going to get into that a little bit. The timelines on the graph can be adjusted and customized as well. So say I'm looking at this credit spread here. First of all, the number of lines is flexible. You can go down to 1 line or up as high as 5. Doesn't allow more than 5. It gets pretty jumbled above that, so that's kind of the cutoff there. And now we can flip that legend, just flips around depending on where an open spot is in the program. But it's always there somewhere. This is the legend for all of your different timelines. So what you see on the bottom here in the summary section below the graph is based on whichever one of these is highlighted. T stands for trade. There's a 0 is today plus 0. So that's today. This would be 2 days from now, which would be a weekend day, and so on. And now the numbers down here change depending on which line you click on. So each of these numbers down below corresponds to a vertical line directly above it. So that 330 a profit there is at the price of 880 in 2 days. That's what your spread would make, $330 in 2 days if our price was right there. So now the way I like to use the graph here is by, rather than looking at the numbers down below, if you just left-click and hold it, you can actually move this around. As long as you put your cursor right in this little wand here, it'll open up a box down below, and you can see what the price of your underlying is under axis there at the price of the underlying. Right directly below that is your exact profit at that price. And then if we slide it left or right, we'll see the price change. Everything changes according to that new price. It's still on that same timeline of 2 days. But now we're seeing all of the numbers change according to a new projection based on a new price of the underlying. It's not changing anything else here except the price as I click and drag and move it. But you see the profit and loss and all the Greeks change accordingly. But the timeline doesn't shift when I move this box. So one favorite way of mine to analyze a trade is to click on the various timelines and keep the price the same. We can see how the position would change that way. Or as I just demonstrated, click on a timeline and then slide it up and down and see how the price and all the Greeks would change that way. And you'll get a new break even every time you click on a new timeline. You'll see this dotted vertical line here change. So if I clicked on T+7, you see that break even line shift over. We now have more room before we get below the 0 profit line. And then finally on T+9, that's the expiration line. There's our break even at expiration. So typically when the program opens, when you first open the graph, you are on T+9 expiration, whatever the expiration line is. So one common call that we get is, well, why don't I see any numbers down below if you're on expiration, or if you're on T+0, for example, you see a whole different look here. So on T+0, we don't, for example, see any standard deviation range, because in order to have a standard deviation, you need to have a time frame, and there's no time here. So we don't get any range of price over a bell curve distribution, standard deviation. As soon as I click on a timeline that has some time to it, we do get the standard deviation to show up. And when I put my cursor on it, it'll show me the volatility that it's using, because it's basically the statistical volatility in OptionVue that is being used to recreate these first and second standard deviation ranges. And that's very important because that's generating the probability of profit for your trade here. So if that number is going to be moving in the future, for example, if the volatility then rose dramatically, that would change your probability of profit, which is over on the left margin under current bell results. We see a P.P, stands for probability of profit, 55%. Now watch what will happen if I can actually modify the volatility that the graph is using from the matrix by highlighting this VOLT. It's defaulted to the statistical volatility for Google, but I can type in anything here. Say I put in 20% and analyze that. Now I've got a probability of profit of 71%. Let's go back and change that to 30%. If statistical volatility, for example, changed in the future to 30%, this is what it would look like now. We get a probability of profit at expiration of 65%. So a big difference there in terms of what kind of results you can expect based on the input. Just leave it, at first you can just leave it on the, if you're not sure what to do with that number, and it can be a little tricky as to what's going to happen with volatility in the future. Nobody really knows. One typical thing that we could do, though, in order to improve the accuracy of that graph and projection, is to pick the near or at the money call implied volatility and substitute that in that box. So if I was over here using this weekly, I could put the 15.3 number in there rather than what was in that box, and then we could expect the volatility over the life of that option, if that's the one we were trading, to be a more accurate projection. And that's going to give me a higher probability of profit, which could affect whether I want to do that trade or not. But it does not affect the outcome on any of these timelines in terms of profitability at a various price. It's important to recognize that. All I did was change the probability of those outcomes occurring. I did not change the actual profit and loss of any of those lines when I changed the volatility on the matrix. So think of that as your statistical volatility, or historical. We call it statistical in OptionVue, but it's really historical volatility we're looking at, or based on the movement of the stock itself. Now there's another way we can adjust the graph here, and that is according to the Volte change box, or the volatility change. I could project a different volatility level in the future. Now the program is very sophisticated, so it's already doing that to some extent as the underlying moves. It's going to shift the implied volatility, projected volatility of those options. So it's actually projected volatility that the program is using. It's not either implied or statistical, it's a projection of volatility in the future. So I can change that, and that's going to change the value of those lines, and hence the profitability by changing. If I put in a bigger number there, if I add 3, for example, what's going to happen is all these lines shift away from the expiration line. So I just created a whole different look here. So now the probability of hitting various prices on the graph here didn't change, but what did change was the profitability. So different than changing the statistical volatility in the matrix, here I can actually change the outcome, the profitability of any of these lines except for expiration. This will only affect lines that have some time value. Only the time value gets affected when we change the volatility here. So think of this as your implied volatility shift in that Volte change box, and think of this as your statistical volatility reading, and you can alter that according to your preference, or just leave it at the default. So that's very important in evaluating a trade. If, for example, if you saw a 50% probability of profit there, and of course the risk reward isn't that great, you might shy away from the trade. But of course at a probability of profit of 77%, this trade looks a lot more attractive, because now we have a much better chance of hitting our profit zone than we do of ending up in the negative zone or loss territory here. So what volatility level you pick is crucial, and as I suggested, you could just leave it at the, if you're not sure, go ahead and leave it at the default statistical volatility. But if you want to see what it would look like at various volatility levels, if you are expecting volatility to fall in the future, then during the life of your trade, you could change that number. Again, that is under the Volte SV box there, short for statistical volatility. So one way you could use that information is if you looked at the volatility chart here, and I'm going to use daily lines. Here we see our 30-day implied volatility and our statistical volatility, or historical. It's just semantics there. It's our version of historical. And we saw that the statistical volatility, that brown line, is falling. We could then, theorize that it's going to, or project it's going to continue to fall in the future, then adding in that lower volatility number that I was just showing you there makes some sense. But if it was rising, then of course you might want to increase it a bit to gauge the real risk in your trade there. So we covered a lot of ground, and that's how you can get up to speed pretty quickly on the program. There's, of course, a lot of more stuff I could go over here. I didn't cover anywhere near everything, but that should get you going. Basically, the breakdown of the program is option matrix, the price chart. There's one other feature that I wanted to show you brand new. We do have an improving, I'll say it's improving price chart with the different technicals, because we're constantly adding new technicals and upgrading the features. One feature we just added is this lower chart, which I can turn on or off here. So this is the price chart of Google, and I can turn that off, that lower chart, using this button to put it back on here. Now there's different indicators which I can get to and change the indicators here for the lower chart. So this is what we have available right now. Stochastics, RSI, MACD, which is moving average, convergence, divergence. RSI, of course, is relative strength index. Momentum, momentum divergence, put call ratios, etc. Everything that you see on this list here. If I wanted to change those a faster way rather than clicking and then clicking in the button on the lower chart setting, we can just right-click. This is a new feature right-click on the lower chart, and it brings up the list of everything that you just saw, so it just saves you a little bit of time there. So I could change this to put-call volume ratios, so there we go. Or I could change it to, what I can't do is change any of the settings, but I can flip between the settings I already have for these different indicators. If you wanted to change the setting, you still have to go into the indicator window, which is third from the right there. So Lentz volatility, which is a proprietary formula that our Director of Education, Steve Lentz, created. Very nice. Tells you basically what's happening with statistical volatility. If it's above the line, above the zero line, that's favorable for income strategy where you're selling options. If it's below the line, it's not so favorable. That means the volatility is increasing basically and for the underlying, and that's kind of a warning flag for putting on a neutral strategy, like a condor, for example. So that's my view, my quick view of how to get set up with OptionVue, and I hope that helps get you going. Any of you new users, and for those of you that stuck around, even though you're already a power user, I hope you learned a couple of things and went over a couple of new items. But there's so much more to discover in OptionVue, so let me just show you how you would go about doing that. If you want to study it further, you can go to our web page at OptionVue.com, and there are just a wealth of information here under View Archive Recordings, so past events. This recording will be on probably tomorrow or sometime in the near future, and all these are stored over here, so these are all our different presenters for OptionVue Essentials. They're all saved there, very useful. To get to the main, we can go back to the main page here. If you click on Support, and then OptionVue Video Tutorials, which you can also click on from the Help menu that I just showed you. It'll take you right to this link directly. These are all the tutorials done by Steve Lentz, our Director of Education. Very helpful. So you'll go through a lot of the same information, maybe not in quite as much detail, but you'll get the basic idea. Backtrader, which I didn't get to today, or in some of the previous demonstrations I've done, you could view those for a detailed explanation. But this would be the basic overview for each of the program features. And then to get to the advanced ones are under OptionVue OV7 Essentials. So that's more the advanced and more in-depth tutorials. Hope that helps get you going, and let me just click out of the screen sharing here, just so I can see if there's any questions. The survey list, so is that always the case? Yeah, that's going to be the case. That is, so Ralph asks if the survey list quotes are from yesterday, and that is going to be the case there in the survey. So the OpScan is a real-time service. Survey and Trade Finder will work in backtrader mode, which is our delayed data service and the back testing feature. And that looks like it. So I guess I went slow and easy this time. Normally I try to race through, cover as much ground as possible, but this time I just wanted to make sure everybody was getting it. So I hope that I guess I did an okay job. I don't see any other questions. All right, we'll talk to you again next month, and enjoy the program. Thank you for attending, everyone.